Now program is brought to you with the support of our founding partners.
So without further ado, let me introduce our very special distinguished guest. First, we have Ashley Colas. Ashley, please, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. Ashley is the superintendent at Uvalde ISD.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ashley Colas, and I am the very proud superintendent of Uvalde CISD. I've been here for 17 months and working very hard every day to build trust in our community. And I'm very happy to be here today as part of the panel guests.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. We're glad that you were able to join us and share your experiences. And Mr. Guy Blissner, I think you don't need an introduction. Is that correct?
I don't know, but my day job is as a school safety and security analyst for the State Board of Education in Idaho. I came out of the classroom and into administration, was a school safety and security director at a district here in Idaho, helped write the legislation that created the office I now work for. So we have a unique vision of the approach here in Idaho. And then I do a fair amount of other things. Serve with the NCSSD as a founding member of that organization. I am the national president for the National Council on School Facilities, and I serve on ASIS as school safety and security, building the school safety standard, and a board member for the National School Safety Center group. So all of that and $4 will get you a small cup of coffee at your local Starbucks.
Awesome. And Mr. Blissner has led the effort on the National Council of School Safety Directors in creating the Foundations for School Security Leadership program, which are running through the very first time right now. I think we're on lesson 6. Is that right, Guy? And so this will be open up to the general public after we get through another run through. So this is it's a great program, and I'm personally learning a lot. So thank you, Guy. And Mr. Doug Snow, please, would you mind introducing yourself, sir?
Yes, Doug Snow. I'm the School Safety and Success Coordinator at Mountain Crest High School in the Cache School District. Retired high school principal, spent 35 years in the system. Got involved in school safety, I would say probably 6 or 7 years ago, where in fact I met Guy. He came and did a safety audit at our school. Our district several years ago adopted the CSTAG model for threat assessment. I was involved in one of the first threat assessments as a building principal and really became pretty passionate about that process and all things school safety. And so I have a unique position where I get to work full time as a retired principal at a specific high school and work on all aspects of school safety, and also have a group of kids that I mentor and a few other things. But it's been a wonderful experience and something I really enjoy, and I look forward to this conversation today.
Awesome. Yeah, this is like I said, this is probably the most foundational conversation when it comes to anything related to school safety and security. So Ashley, I mean, from your perspective, what does it mean by positive school safety culture? What does that mean to you? How would you define that?
How I would say that positive school safety culture it's really about how people feel in the building, and our practices. Do they know what our practices are? Do they understand why we use these practices? Do they feel confident that they're safe on our campus because of these practices? Is there open dialogue? Are we building relationships? Everything's about relationships whenever you talk about culture. Like, how do people feel? And so are you building a relationship for your people with safety and security? Do they have the schema? Do they feel comfortable with the tools? Do they have a relationship with it? And so that's what I would say about positive safety culture.
And that's great. And the last week we've been having roundtables with school administrators, school safety directors, and that was really one of the key aspects that you mentioned, Ashley, is relationships and building those relationships, the human element of that. And Guy, I know you facilitated some of those roundtables, and one of the things that you pointed out was the difference between culture and climate. And how would you define those two elements?
The way to look at it from my perspective, and we define these as part of the foundations course. Climate is the perception of. How do you feel? And perception can reflect reality or be at odds with reality. But culture is the doing. It is the common and shared practices and expectations, the ethos of the group. Do we do the things we say we do? Do we know why we do the things we say we do? And when you begin to create that cultural element, it will affect the climate piece.
And can you measure culture? Can you measure climate, Guy, while you're on it?
Everything is measurable if you pick the right metric. And I believe if it matters, you measure it. And if you measure it, it matters. A foundational understanding from the educational background I have. But yes, you can if you pick the metrics that you want to use. And then part of that is working with that group, that stakeholders group, and say what's important. And then we say, once we determine what's important, how do we measure it? And do we do the things we say we do? And that old issue, why do we do what we do? Sometimes we get lost in the mists of time, why we do the things we do. It's always good to go back and look at what you're doing and say, does the goal we initially met for this process still matter? And if it does, are we still meeting the goal? So there are a lot of those things. Again, you can't measure it all at once, but you can pick out specific elements to measure. It's an elephant. You have to eat it one bite at a time.
And so you mentioned stakeholders, Guy. Actually, I know we talked about this before. Who are the stakeholders? Who should be a part of that safety and security process at a school or a school district?
Well, often we look at stakeholders as a positive group. These are the people who want to help me accomplish this. We also need to remember that the stakeholders will be your naysayers as well. And they may be more important than the folks who want to help you get there, because you have to bring them along. So it's the definition we used in the foundations was anyone who through inaction or by intent can derail your efforts. We have to call them stakeholders and pull them in and bring them along.
Absolutely. So I would say that it's everyone. Safety is everyone's job, from the kids in the classrooms. If their teacher had a medical emergency, they need to know how to respond. It's our custodians. If they see someone that doesn't belong jump a fence and come toward the school, they need to know how to respond. Your cafeteria workers, a fire breaks out in the kitchen and the cafeteria is full of 300 kids. They need to know how to respond. It's your teachers, it's your administrators, it's everyone who is in that building, in that space, to include parents whenever they come in the door. We use standard response protocol. Those should be clearly defined in easy spaces where if someone is experiencing an emergency on your campus, any stakeholder can look and know exactly what to do. We also send home pamphlets for parents to talk to their kids regarding standard response protocol. So my answer is everyone.
Now, do you agree with that? Because I have heard, it's I think it's a common perception. When we have an SRO, they're responsible for safety and security. We have a safety director, that person is responsible. Doug, do you agree that it's everyone's responsibility, and how do you get that buy-in if that's the case?
I do, and I heard at the class, and Guy, you can help me remember that safety is not, sometimes it's treated as an add-on as opposed to it's part of the educational process. There's reading, writing, arithmetic, and safety. It's part of everything that we do. And so I do agree it's everybody. For example, we have a script that I've given to the teachers that tell them exactly what to say if they encounter an adult in the building that doesn't have a credential. The chances of the resource officer or myself seeing that person before anybody else is slim. It's probably going to be a maintenance worker a teacher out in the hall during their prep, or a student. So we have a clearly defined script and procedure. So that would be an example of that being everybody's business. And so we train, we try to involve students. I have students helping me do door checks. Our safety committee, we're putting some students. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow morning, and I have a couple of students presenting their take on school safety. It's everyone's business. And I think when you involve everybody, you get better buy-in, and you get better perspectives, because we can, get little blinders and see what we see, but having those other people contribute is a big deal.
Now, Guy, are there other nuts and bolts to building a culture of safety in a school or a district?
There are absolutely nuts and bolts, and it's behavioral change. And as educators, we live with behavioral change forever. I mean, who do you think developed the blue star on the forehead? It was, defining what that behavioral change is, what you want to accomplish. I mean, there are 8 defined steps, and we can certainly talk about those. And we brought those to the foundations course. But yeah, there are proven methods to accomplish this process, and it starts with the assessment. Know where you are. You have to know where you are before you can go anyplace.
Well, one of the interesting things that came out, or insights from the conversation we had at the roundtable last week, was the importance of people. And you mentioned, the relationships. Ashley, it's all about relationships. But I mentioned my experience with the Disney Institute and their whole approach. It's all about people. It's all about who you hire, who's on your team, and getting the buy-in from the people on your team. Like that is really the backbone of culture, because you could have the best, most experienced person who just does not mesh with the team or buy into the overall culture, and then you've got a major gap there. That's certainly a critical issue. And so, how do you at Uvalde, for example? I mean, how do you engage with obviously identifying the right fit for your team, where they fit in, and getting their buy-in to contribute to your safety and security initiatives? Ashley.
Here. So Uvalde's in a really unique situation because we're about 90 minutes away from a metropolitan city, which is San Antonio, and it's difficult to recruit. So in a lot of ways, in many ways, we have to work with who we have. And so the way that I have figured out to come in is to build a collective understanding of where we are, right? We assess. And I do that in teams, like big team. Like I think we had probably 75 people, 85 people that came and helped us do our safety audits on the campuses. They were broken up into teams, and everybody did different work. But once we had the audits, then our big safety and security team, which is about 40 or so stakeholders from our community, we looked at the data. Then once there was a clear understanding of where we were at, we went through an exercise to prioritize it. And so having everyone have common understanding, common language around what our problems are that we want to solve, what we view as our biggest safety concerns, then we made a plan. And so whenever I'm able to share with the community that that's how we came up with this, and we have teachers on the committee, we have custodians on the committee, we included people, and they have a good idea of exactly how we got there. So they're able then to go back to their campus, they're able to go back into the community and talk about, well, the reason we're doing this or the reason we're not doing this, about 85 of us got together and went and did safety audits on all the campuses. And then we got back together and looked at the data, and then we prioritized it, and then we made a plan. And so that's why we're doing this, this, and this. And we're going to evaluate that, and then we're going to make a plan from there. So when everyone has a collective understanding and common language around the problem we're trying to solve, and there was a process to get there, I think that structure lends itself to maybe some people who might not have been the right people becoming the right people. And so sometimes you have to work with who you have and that's one great way to make sure that more of the people that you have are the right people at the end of the day.
And actually, are you engaging with parents as well when you talk about stakeholders and all the people that are involved? Is it strictly staff and students, or are they also involved as parents?
Parents are also involved. On our committee, I think we've got about 4 parents that are elementary and about 3 parents that are secondary. So there are about 7 parents involved in our process. Some of them are also district employees, but in a town of 15,000, where UCISD is the biggest employer, we're going to have, some parents that kind of are also on staff. So, but there are actually probably more, but there were 7 non-connected parents on the committee.
Guy, please go ahead.
Doug and Ashley, I think, will resonate with this. When we took our ed leadership courses, we talked about that being that visionary educational leader and waving the flag and pulling people with you. And always in the context of education, we need to also do those things in the context of creating that security culture. It's absolutely critical that you may not have to be, you may have a school security director, but you have to be that cheerleader. The building principal has to be the focal point of that. The superintendent has to be. They have to be that educational. They have to wave the flag and follow me.
Well, and going back to that, reinforcing that whole point that safety and security is everyone's responsibility. It's a shared responsibility. It's not just the superintendent or the safety director. And building that culture. And, we talk about focusing on prevention. It's obviously safety is all about preventing. How do we make sure that we are in a safe and secure environment? And Doug, in your experience, so. I've heard, you hear stories of, situations where there might be a student that might be contemplating harming themselves or harming other students. And so what are some mechanisms that a student body or parent or teacher can utilize if they're concerned about a student that might be harming themselves or harming someone else?
Sure. So we implemented a procedure called the student of concern procedure. So it's a homegrown, our tech department established this Google form that's on every teacher's desktop computer. And so in 20 seconds or less, they can inform our student assistance team about a student they're worried about. It'll timestamp the teacher's email, their name, and so the teacher literally just fills in the name of the kid, the grade, and their concern, and it goes to our team, and we look at it immediately to determine, do we need to act now or can it wait for our weekly meeting? So it populates a spreadsheet, it sends us an email and a PDF. And the neat thing about this procedure is it aggregates the data. So if the first hour teacher, the cook, the bus driver, the coach, and the fifth hour teacher are all worried about this kid, then we know there's a crisis because multiple people are worried about the same kid. But as of today, we've had over 90 reports from staff about students of concern where their baseline behavior has changed. And we all know that teachers get really close to their students. They know how that kid acts in a school classroom setting better than anybody. And so they're aware if something's changed. And the teacher has so much on their plate, this gives them in 20 seconds, it's off their plate. And the other key is we respond to that teacher and let them know that we've got the report, we're working on it, so they know if they report, something happens. And this has been a game changer of the culture. It's something everybody can do, and we've helped a lot of kids with it just this year.
And I've shared the story with folks a number of times about my brother's school district where they were able to intervene. A student wrote a manifesto of harming students and brought a firearm and ammunition, and his friend reported him to the school, shared concern with the principal that, hey, I saw this as, he needs help, and they were able to get that student help and disarm the situation before an event happened. That is absolutely critical. But creating a safe environment where students feel that they can go to an administrator, a teacher, guidance counselor, and not feel like you're snitching, right? Because nobody wants to be a snitch. And Guy, how do you address that from a culture perspective? Like it's okay to share your concerns with an administrator or principal.
Well, two things. There's immense institutional inertia in schools against reporting, not only for kids, but for teachers to say anything, because they're so in the ancient past, when I went into a classroom, they threw you a set of keys, said, kid, teach the quadratic equation. Don't call me till you can't handle it. So we didn't say anything because we were horrified that our teacher evaluation would say does not have good classroom management skills. So it comes from the leadership telling their folks to tie them in. And as Doug said, making sure that you tie that back. That's the relationship piece that Marzano and others have talked about is an absolute critical element for effective educational outcomes. It's a critical element for effective security outcomes. So you do that. You work with kids talking about being an upstander, not a bystander. And again, it's important for them to know that you want to help this student, their friend. It's not a punitive process. So again, it's that, and I think Ashley talked about it with her community. It's building the trust. It's creating that understanding that they believe that if they report this, that student will be helped, and that it's not throwing prayer, and that they're not going to be punitively treated.
Doug, you want to go ahead, sir?
Yeah. So on top of that, one thing we really stress with our faculty, our staff, is that the most important thing we can do to keep the school safe, keep kids safe, is to develop great relationships with the kids. The COPS program put out a report that I shared with our faculty. We had a training on this, on averted school shootings. What are things people are doing that prevented a school shooting? And the number one thing was the building of relationships. In fact, 57% of the school shootings that were averted were because the student had a trusted adult that they could go to. And so the vast majority, and then the second was administration involvement. And so when you add those two together, that was over 85% of averted shootings, because the school had emphasized building trust with kids so that they would go and report. And the guy's point, snitching, your motivation is to get someone in trouble. Reporting, your motivation is to help somebody. And so we try to emphasize that with kids.
And actually, in your district, I mean, is that a deliberate effort to encourage relationships, or does that become institutionalized? How do you, from the top leader of the top executive of the district? I mean, how do you encourage that or operationalize that?
First of all, I think it's important for the leader to model the behavior that they want people to take on. And so I do my very best to build relationships with people. We talk about it. We're going through a process to define our mission and our vision with our community stakeholders, students, parents. By the way, we also had students on our safety and security audit teams. Okay. So, but we're doing that work, and we're defining what it looks like. Like, I know that I want people to build relationships with kids. The fact is, everyone here is traumatized. And if we don't map it out, what does that look like? What are the behaviors? How do we account for it? How do we affect change? Then we will not get anywhere. We'll just be spinning our wheels. So we've worked to start to define all of those things. And from there, we'll make a plan and some expectations so that we affect behavior. And we're doing this, it's a grassroots movement, right? So we've convened task forces and committees, and we're putting things back out. Whenever we create something in our committee, we're sending it out to people for feedback. We're taking that feedback, we're making adjustments, and then we're moving from there. So I think that you can say you need to build relationships, to people, but if you don't model it, if you then don't define it and make a plan for it and help people understand that it's the little things. Are you greeting them at the door? There are programs I could have thrown in capturing kids' hearts, okay? Because that's about how do you build relationships. But I knew coming in here, in order to build the trust, we have to build it ourselves. Like we've got to go through the process to build the system for what does building relationships in our district after a tragedy look like, and what are we all agreeing to do? We all know what the best practices for social emotional learning are. Okay, and we're using a lot of that because we're educating people as we go. But at the end of the day, it's going to be how are we doing that in Uvalde CISD? Well, it's going to look like what it needs to look like for us because we're going to have built it. So.
Exactly. Mr. Blissner.
And you've heard this, RN, we've built it into both the pathway to safer schools and certainly into the foundations course. But it's an understanding that security is about people first and the educational environment second. And oddly enough, what's good for education tends to be good for security. Marzano's middle schools that work, people in the hallway interacting with kids. You see things and you report things and you intervene with things. And while you're out there building the relationship, it's good educational practice is often good security practice.
No, that's a great point. And guy, one of the I'm going to set this one right up for you. One of your you coined a term or a concept about teachers, right? Because teachers are with students more than even their parents are during the day. Do you want to discuss the teacher superpower with everyone?
And that's kind of the teacher's superpower is what Doug talked about, harnessing with his behaviors of concern or students of concern piece. And like all things, we steal that. I stole it from Natalie Stone and Doug stole it from me. And we file the serial number off and kind of adjust it to fit our needs. But teachers have a superpower. And they don't know they have this superpower, but they know these kids' baseline behaviors in a social situation better than their parents. And we can say things like, well, if a child is self-isolating, that's an issue. It depends on the kid. The young man who's sitting in the corner reading at lunch and has since third grade that's not aberrant behavior. He's not deviating from his norm. But if you didn't know that child, you wouldn't know that. So what we do is empower teachers to, one, understand what that is, know their superpower, and then give them a process to harness effectively that superpower. And that's what Doug has done and what Natalie Stone did when we stole it from her. And then you tell teachers, you have a superpower. Use your superpower. I want you to use your and that comes from building administration and school, district administration and school boards saying that's important to us.
So, and I'm stealing it from Doug, or maybe I'm stealing it from you, but I've been using that phrase quite a bit. So thank you very much. So on that note, Doug, I know a number of educators, and when we talk about safety and security, and I bring up the teacher superpower and the concept that safety is everyone's responsibility, I often hear that teachers already have enough on their plate. So now you're adding safety and security. So how do you address that as a principal? How would you guide or provide advice to a school administrator when we're talking about safety is everyone's responsibility, teachers have a superpower, and then yet there's also the reality that there's already a lot on the teacher's plate other than teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's so much time, but it just has to become the priority. As I mentioned earlier, it's part of the reading, writing, arithmetic, safety. It's part of the 3 R's. So you have 3 R's and an S, and that just becomes what we do. And so our job as administrators and safety specialists is to provide training and keep it at the forefront of our teachers' mind, good quality training involving students, involving the other stakeholders, keeping it there. Because our goal is to have safety and security running smoothly in the background so that staff can come into the building and students can come into the building and experience the joy of school on a daily basis. That's the goal, but they know that the safety and security policies and procedures are running in the background, and that only happens with a good training schedule and the communication, transparency, knowing that we have drilled, we have put these policies and procedures, and we focus a lot on left of bang. Of course, our resource officers and other police focus on right of bang. And so together, we have all that together, that works together. Really, they're not at odds with each other, which we talked about in the course. And so as an administrator, a former administrator, my suggestion is just make sure you have all the support there. You have your safety team, everything's communicated clearly, transparently, and you practice and drill and you create that time so that teachers and kids feel confident in the procedures and policies that you have in place, and the why behind all those are put in place. Then I think it's not that big of a heavy lift. You get to that tipping point in the culture where people's actions are matching their beliefs and the gap shrinks and you're kind of off and running.
And for what it's worth, we have to make it easy for a teacher to do. And that's the student of concern form. We made it low drag, 20 seconds. A teacher can do that. Now, and I saw it in Doug's building, in a building where the culture and the relationships are right, that teacher is going to go and hit that and send it. But he's also going to see Doug in the hallway and say, Doug, did you get that deal on Johnny? Or Doug's going to go back to him and say, got it, we're on it. You know, again, we have to make it low drag because teachers are overwhelmed.
Exactly. It reminds me of I was watching the Office Space movie with my son the other day, and he just started his first career job working in the office. But the TPS reports, you got. But if you make it difficult for people to participate, you're right. Very, very low drag. Doug, you mentioned something that is very important. I think all of our goal here is to live and stay left of bang, and ultimately, hopefully, we never get to bang. Guy, you mentioned the path to safer schools. The goal would be to end at prevention, and that's it. There's nothing beyond that, and we don't have to get to response and recovery. Obviously, that's very idealistic. Doug also mentioned something about communication. So, Ashley, what are some ways that you foster open communication about safety with students, staff, parents, the community at large?
So we use our reporting tool. We make sure that we always follow up. It's pretty much an open door policy. If someone has a concern, we want to hear it. So there are multiple ways that people can tell us their concerns. And then we listen, we follow back up. A lot of what they talked about, the two other panelists, it has to do with shared understanding, common goals, and building the trust to have them talk to us about it, and that we're going to do something about it. People have to see action. They can tell you and tell you and tell you, and if you're not doing anything about what they're telling you, or at least having a conversation about why you're not doing something about what they're telling you, then they think you're not listening and they quit telling you, which decreases safety. So we try to have continuous conversations. We try to include a lot of different people. When I'm walking to campus, if I see a kid out in the hallway, I'll ask them. Sometimes it's just asking the question, hey, what are you doing in the hallway? They'll tell me, and I'll ask them, do you feel safe everywhere on campus? I mean, the kids would probably tell you that I ask them, here and there whenever I see them, where do you not feel safe on the campus? Is there anywhere? But I need that feedback. So we have to continue to have open dialogue and then do something about it when we're told that something's unsafe.
I love the ask them, and I went one beyond that and we used a site plan and a floor plan. Go into a classroom, give kids two colored pencils, a red pencil and a yellow pencil. Have them put an X where stuff happens. have them put a red X, have them put a yellow X where they don't feel safe, aggregate the data. And we had our third grade teachers integrating that into a spatial perception lesson plan. We had our student it's a hope squad for many of our folks, but we have our those student support groups that are student led do those. We had STUCOs, student council folks do it, but it gives the administrator a student eye view of what the kids perceive. It's basically student perception surveying on steroids.
It's amazing you mentioned that. And Doug, I'll jump to you in a second. We 2 years ago, we had our first Zero Now annual meeting, and we had students attending as well as administrators and safety professionals. And this is kind of where we started down the path to safer schools, because it was clear that most schools, administrators, most adults felt that, we're never going to have anything bad happen here in our school. We're a safe environment. Nothing's going to happen here. And students, on the other hand, it's like, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And they're expecting something bad. And how can you always talk about Sky creating a safe learning environment. How can you learn when you're constantly have that in the back of your mind, that anxiety, that you're fearful that something bad is going to happen at school? And that was really, that I think most of us realize that, yeah, this is a serious issue. So how do we get to that point? And we always talk about with Zero Now, our goal and objective is to make generational change, right? So kids go to school and they feel safe, right? That safety is a feeling. And so that's what we're trying to get to. So sorry, Doug, I know you had a comment there.
Yeah. So a couple things. A good friend and colleague of mine, told me that when a parent drops their kid off at the front door, they want three things. They want their kid to be safe, they want their kid to be treated well, and they want them to learn at a high level. Anything else is gravy. That's what they want. And we all know if a kid's not being treated well or they don't feel safe, they're not going to learn as well as they could. And so going back to your question, the communication piece is key. So a couple of things we've gotten good mileage out of here is I put out a Friday safety tip to the staff. Every Friday, it might be the reason why we stand out in the hall during passing time, or hey, if you're walking by an outside door, take a look to see if it's been propped open and pull it shut, just whatever the safety tip is. And then every time we drew a drill, I sent out a thing to all the parents explaining why we're doing the drill, what our procedures are, and what things they can do to share with their students prior to the drill, so people feel comfortable with it. So there's lots of communication pieces and trainings that you can provide for your cooks and your maintenance staff and so on and so forth. But that communication and transparency really does alleviate a lot of that fear, where people feel like they've had training and preparedness.
Transparency, yes. And we were just talking about that last month about funding. And funding your safety initiatives and the importance of transparency. This is what we're doing, and getting community buy-in, that this is a priority. And we talked about last month, part of a safety culture going up to the school board level. I know we've got some school board members participating here, is to build that into the budget. We got a little bit of safety in IT, we got a little bit of safety in facilities, we got a little bit over here in whatever department. There should be its own line item in the budget. And speaking to parents about and the community, here's what we are investing in our safety and security initiatives. We had a great discussion with North Penn School District and how their school board, superintendent, and safety director work together to do that. But creating a line item was a very specific thing. We are getting short on time, so we're going to start taking some questions. But before we do, Guy Blissner, I think you had something you wanted to add.
I just wanted to say that one of the things we have to remember, as you build that cultural awareness of safety, it becomes easier and easier to find the funding, because people are more and more aware of the situation and consider it. So the foundational piece is not money first, it's culture first.
It is. Culture is, that's the thing. It sounds so amorphous. Okay, yeah, what is culture? Okay, it's out there. No, it's your DNA. It's who you are. It's how you think, how you behave. All right, so we are going to take some questions from participants. The first one, and whoever wants to answer this, yeah, go ahead and unmute your line if you want to take this one here. So one, and maybe I'll ask for all three of you, what is one successful strategy that you have used or seen used to contribute towards a positive safety culture? One successful strategy, Doug.
So one thing besides that student of concern form is our threat assessment philosophy. So our principal here, Principal Morrison, she is amazing. She's a former special ed teacher, and so she really gets the behavior piece. We hardly ever suspend, even threat assessment. So one thing we do is anytime we have a threat assessment, they get put on my list. I have a list of kids that I mentor. So I meet with these kids regularly because the important thing is making contact with kids that have made a mistake, keeping contact so they know you care, that you're interested in their education, their well-being. And so we have a pulse on those kids. And we have a couple of cases now, kids I work with, they're really turning the corner. And I really believe it's because of our principal's philosophy. Sometimes we have to remove them from a class and we have a space to do that, but we have all kinds of support. So managing threat assessment and students of concern, having those be the two agenda items on your student assistant team meeting, and that those cases are managed and followed up and those kids are cared for, makes a huge difference. So that's one of the things I think we're real proud of here at Mountain Crest, is how we deal with the threat assessment and helping those kids, not being punitive.
No, thank you, Doug. Aaron Skirben asked this one. So one successful strategy that I've seen, I've heard used at a roundtable last week was having students create safety videos, promoting safety aspects. Make sure you shut the door, or as guys photo shared with us. Don't leave the door open and put a rock in there. That's a security breach. But that certainly is something to engage, with students, get them involved with that whole positive safety culture is, certainly, one of the aspects I think that is important. Guy,
we have to quit differentiating safety culture for students and safety culture for staff. It is a school community safety culture. It has to be holistic. It has to address all of the groups that are part of your community.
Culture. Exactly. Ashley.
So I would say start with the one thing that's the most high leverage. If you've identified an issue with people propping doors, I'm just going to use that as an example, then begin to acknowledge people who close the door and lock it behind them and use their key and take their badge every single time. Acknowledge those people. When you find someone who is not, give the directive. Don't be afraid to give safety directives, and be clear. Be clear about what you want. If it's not propping the doors, if it's being at your door to greet kids when they walk in your room every day, be clear about what you're measuring, measure it, acknowledge, document, and until you start to get that behavior implemented. Then then celebrate whenever you get to 98%, 100%, whatever your goal was, then go to the next behavior when it becomes ingrained. And if you do that all year long, by the end of the year, you can have a whole set of new behaviors.
Great. No, that's fantastic. Guy.
I was just going to say it's exactly the issue, and you've heard me talk about this, but industrial safety in the past, we were killing people and cutting off arms, and you go by a manufacturing plant now and it says 122 days without a lost time accident. That's behavioral modification, and it's a well-studied phenomenon. And there are steps to it, and we covered them in the fossil class. So, if anybody wants me to go off on that, contact me. I'll go off on that for months. I don't want to do it now because there are other things, but behavioral change to accomplish a safer environment is a well-studied process.
I mean, ultimately, culture is shaped by positive reinforcement, positive and negative reinforcement, but it is about behavioral change. This is how we as a school or a school district behave as an organism versus an individual. And that's kind of what it comes down to, Guy.
I'm going to tell a quick story on my favorite superintendent ever. Her name is Molly Stein. Molly was the superintendent in Soda Springs, Idaho. She started as a paraprofessional and ended up the last 7 years of her career as the superintendent. She was having trouble getting people to wear a badge. They said, well, it's everybody knows who I am. That's dumb. Why do I have to? Which is not why we wear a credential at all. But she finally got tired of fighting her staff, had an assembly at each of her 3 schools, walked out with a visitor's badge and a staff badge and said, if you see somebody in this building without one of these or one of these, she held up a case of candy bars. You tell an adult you get one of these. The kids started ratting out the teachers who wouldn't wear their badge. It was amazing. And she's been retired now for 2 years. I did an assessment in her in her former district this spring. I walked into her elementary school through the front door because I couldn't get anywhere else, through the office, checked in as I had to, put my badge in my pocket, walked down the hall. First door I went back, a second grader looked up, big smile on his face, said, teacher, he doesn't have a tag. It's just the way they do business.
Yeah, which is the culture. I mean, that is the culture of that school. I mean, that's certainly that's a great story. We do have a couple more questions here. Only 10 minutes left. Dr. Eberly asks, what daily refreshers do you have in place so complacency does not set in with staff and students? So do you need to be doing stuff every day, every week? I mean, are there safety cultural things and Guy, I think you mentioned it. I mean, it's not just about safety culture, it's just culture in general, and safety should be at the root of that because, I mean, talk about psychology, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need to be safe. I mean, that's that is the most important thing. So Doug, are there things that you have in place on a daily basis or recurring basis to reinforce those cultural principles?
Sure. Since we've been talking about doors, let's talk about that for a second. So in the state of Utah, they passed a law that classroom doorknobs have to be locked, and they lock from the inside. So their door can be open or closed, teacher choice, but that doorknob has to be locked. So I'll go around and check doors. I'll go and see if the doorknob's locked, whether it's open or shut. And then I'll report back to the teachers. I'll say, hey, I checked this wing and 85% of them were locked. Okay, next week I'm going to try it again. Let's see if we can get to 95, that kind of thing. And then we check our exterior doors. We have access control, and only some of them open during passing time. We have a couple of outbuildings, but we'll physically check those a minimum of twice a day. And I have student aides that help me do that, and they have a log. We put it on in a spreadsheet once a week. I take the data, and then I've given the principal a half-year report. Here's our doors. Here's where our problems are. So those are checked. And I report that out to the faculty. Hey, a couple of these doors, if you're walking by, check them for us. And we've already explained why we want to funnel everybody to the front and visitor intake. But those are some things that we do on a daily basis. But we share that with the faculty, and that really matters.
One of the things they do in industrial safety is, first of all, they incentivize a group so that for whatever it is you want to accomplish, you incentivize the group. So if you're walking down the hall and you see somebody propping open a door, you say, don't do that. You're going to cost me the half a day of paid time, whatever it is, whatever they define the incentive is. But you also incentivize the individual. If we hit this one, or if you do this thing, you get to go to the safety luau. You've seen those guys in manufacturing that have 9 safety pins on their hat and they're proud to wear it. You have to incentivize both the group and the individual in some fashion. And I'm going to tell you, let them define the incentive. For kids, in one of the high schools I worked with, it was, if we make this for this month, we want an extra half an hour at lunch. The superintendent was all over it. Give them the extra half hour of lunch if they make it. I mean, again, the incentive has to be meaningful to the group, so let them define it. I mean, within reason. New Mercedes, I'd do a lot for, but
I'll do the safety luau. That sounds great. Just let me know. So what's interesting from a cultural perspective, and I'm unlearning certain behaviors, like holding the door open for someone, because it's rude to close the door right behind you. That's just rude. And I remember telling my daughter when she was living in an apartment in DC to make sure you don't, if somebody's right behind you, you need to close the door and tell them they need to buzz in. But it's difficult. I have a hard time doing that. It's just, it's your, so how do you retrain or modify, how do you modify that behavior to encourage people to, for example, close the door behind them, ask the person behind you, you need to scan in, you don't have a badge, I can't let you in. That's difficult for an elementary school student, middle school student, high school student. Any recommendations? That's my question that I submitted. We should have a psychologist on here. We need Dr. Geller on here. Doug.
So going back to an earlier comment, I think is if you can give them a script and they can practice that.
Okay. Guy.
The other one is you have to incentivize it. So ask them what the incentive would be for them to accomplish this thing that you're asking them to accomplish. The other piece is make sure they understand the reason. If they don't understand the reason, you'll never get it. It will never be sustainable over time. It just won't be.
And the community, I'm going to piggyback on what Guy said. The community has to understand why too. Like everyone, the parents need to understand why, visitors need to understand why. You can even put a placard on the gate. For us, it would be a gate, the door that says every person must buzz in, some sort of reinforcer to help with the kids and the community's understanding. We're not being rude to you. We just have to know exactly who's on our campus the moment they step on our campus so that we can receive them. It's so that we can provide good customer service to you and so that we can make sure that we have a safe school.
And so we can keep you safe as well. We can't keep you safe if we don't know you're there.
Great points. Oh, because that is a real issue that 10 years ago wasn't a factor. And it is contrary to the way that we've been brought up. You got to hold the door open for somebody. So those are great points. We have time for one more question. And you, Ashley, I'll direct this to you, and Guy and Doug, feel free to jump, because you kind of mentioned this a little bit. In your opinion, is it true that you get the culture that you create? You talk about modeling, Ashley. So what role does leadership have? And I think it seems like you kind of answered that question, but just if you wouldn't mind elaborating on that.
Sure. So I think that you have to be intentional. You have to understand where you are. You have to understand the context. And then you need to do some intentional planning about what you want your outcome to be. And then you model it every day. You incentivize it, like Guy said, you're clear about it. And you put systems in place for people, such as Doug's report form, a student of interest form. And so you you understand where you are, you make a plan together, you give people the tools, and then you measure it every single day, in some form or fashion.
And that goes back to trust, right?
It goes back to building the trust. Absolutely. When people see action and they understand that you're a person of action and you're taking action based on their input and feedback, then it starts to build that relationship of trust and openness that creates a safer environment, because again, you're making them feel important. And at the end of the day, when someone, a student, a teacher, a parent, any visitor feels loved in their heart, we create a safer environment. A safe heart creates a safer environment.
And to build off that, Ashley, this is the co-founder of Zero Now, Joe Samaha. And by the way, tomorrow is the anniversary of the Virginia Tech shooting. Joe Samaha, who's the co-founder of Zero Now, is the former board president of the VTV Family Outreach Foundation. But Joe always talks about, when it comes to security, you have hardware, software, and hardware, right? It's the human element of that, which is so critical. And we always talk about, security technology is awesome, but it's only as good as the people behind it. Exactly. It's all about the people behind it and augmenting a human's ability to do their job, but you need to have the human element behind it and the empathy, right? It's about empathy and the whole idea behind the teacher superpower, which Guy stole from someone, then Doug stole. I'm going to take it from you guys. is empathy, right? It's seeing, identifying a concerning behavior, putting yourselves in their shoes. Something is just not right here, and being able to have a mechanism to share that with the community, in the school community, your behavior threat assessment team, whoever that is that's behind that can get that student assistance and help. I've been rambling on too long, so before we wrap things up, would love to hear just some final thoughts from each of you and words of wisdom that you want to have our folks take away. And by the way, there are going to be questions that we did not answer here that will, in the Zero Now community, we'll post those questions in there, and Guy and Ashley and Doug could respond to those, and also some key takeaways as well for you to take. So, Guy, we'll start with you. Any final thoughts and key takeaways for our participants?
It's one I often present on, but you cannot purchase a safer school environment. Can't be done. You have to create it. Some of the purchases you make may be tools that help you enhance it but it's a piece that people have to create.
And how much does culture cost? Zero, exactly. Yep. Culture costs zero. Ashley, any final thoughts that you would like to share with our participants?
I think understanding your context, working with teams, knowing the outcomes that you want to achieve, making a plan to get there, and then measuring it and incentivizing it. You can't go wrong in all of that. And leading from the heart, safety truly is heart work. And, you can tell people 100 times not to prop the door, but until you really get them around a table to understand why and what that can create, I think that you're missing the boat. So I would just encourage everyone to make sure they're doing the hard work as they do the hard work.
Exactly. Thanks, Ashley. Great advice. And Mr. Doug Snow, final thoughts from you, sir.
Yeah. So, speaking of stealing, got these from Guy. So he doesn't know this, but I made this sign. These are 3 things I've heard him say a million times, and I have this sign on my wall. Things don't keep schools safe. People keep schools safe. Number 2, people are the tools that we use to keep schools safe. And school security failures are human failures, not equipment or tech failures. And those 3 things, I have that sign on my wall, and it just reminds me how important people are. And so going back to communication, communicate with clarity and transparency, and educate, explain the why of everything we do, and you'll get that buy-in, and you'll have a team working with you, and it's everybody's job. I can't emphasize that enough. It's part of school. And, I think people see that now.
No, absolutely. You can't, we've talked about this before, you can't over communicate. That's part of the culture. Communication is certainly part of the culture. So we are over time now. And I just want to remind folks that our next conversation is May 20th, and we're discussing mental health and early risk detection. We kind of talked about that here, but kind of diving a little deeper into those aspects. And once again, left the bangs, want to make sure that we're preventing harm. And that is absolutely critical here. Mr. Blissner.
Thanks, everyone. It's been truly an honor to spend time with you today.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Guy. And thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.